Good morning and welcome back to Environmental Science. We're going to finish up our content, our material for Unit 1, the big picture today. And we're going to be looking at the community of science. Essentially, we're going to be looking at the last sphere of our illustration of the process of science, or the scientific process, from the previous lesson. This is the sphere down in the bottom right corner, dealing with what happens to our research once we do the research. So, the first thing that needs to happen after you complete your research and feel that you've proven your hypothesis to be correct is you want to present your work to other researchers and scientists and get their feedback. You do this at conferences. There's a bunch of ways to do this. So conferences is one of them. You can also write a paper about your study and distribute that around to other scientists and researchers. Or you can submit your paper for publication in a journal. This is a very common practice, and this is because journals are peer-reviewed, which basically means that other scientists will review your paper that you've submitted, and they'll recommend changes and also will be involved in the decision to reject or accept your paper for publication in that journal. Our hypotheses and our theories should all be able to be replicated, and they should all have a measure of self-correction. And this is part of the process of being peer-reviewed, is that your experimental data and the experiment that you ran to get it should be able to be run by other people, which we talked about in the last lesson. So it needs to be replicated and should have some measure of self-correction. Self-correction basically means that as we accumulate additional knowledge, as we learn more about the way that the world works and so forth, our interpretation of the data may need to be adjusted. Sometimes it can be drastic adjustments, but usually it's pretty minor, especially if you have if we're dealing with an accepted theory. But science is constantly refining itself and improving itself. So even though you have a theory, it still may change over time. In fact, there are lots of examples of this. The little box in the bottom left corner here, where it says, "Did you know?" talks about how scientists used to believe that all the planets and the sun used to revolve around the Earth. And then a scientist named Nicholas Copernicus basically proved through his research and his mathematical prowess that this was actually false. He solved this in the 1500s and was able to show that we, in fact, or the Earth, I should say, was actually revolving around the sun rather than the other way around. So as we're doing research and trying to prove our hypotheses, what we're trying to do is build a theory. And we have to keep in mind that a hypothesis is a testable explanation for some phenomena that we've observed or read about or whatever. But it's some phenomena that we think we know why it's happening. We want to prove it, so we build an experiment and we test it. A theory, once a hypothesis moves to a theory, it tends to be a bit of a broader explanation for a much wider range of observations. So that those observations come from the research process and the process of experimenting or observing, trying to validate the hypotheses. So both of these, hypotheses and theories, have to be testable, and then they need to be supported by multiple lines of evidence. And then not only do they need to be testable, but the tests need to be able to be replicated by other scientists. Once that's all taken care of and the results come out the same every time the test is replicated, then the scientific community will accept your theory. When we're addressing environmental issues and looking at different things, there are elements that we need to consider other than just the pure data and observation. and this is the ethics, the culture, and the worldview. Ethics is basically, as it says, the study of behavior. What's right, what's wrong. Basically these are the moral principles and values that we hold. Culture is basically the shared beliefs and values and knowledge of a group of people. It also deals with, culture also pertains to how people just live and exist together. So that's culture. And then worldview is the perception of the world and your place in it. This really gets down to kind of a philosophical view of who am I, how did I get here, and what am I here for? Those major questions that humans have been asking since the dawn of time. So, what is your perception of the world and your place in it? This is a popular term actually in Christian circles. They see the world as having, or society as having, two worldviews. One is the worldview that there is a creator God, and he's also involved not only in having created the earth, but involved in the day-to-day activities of man and nature and so forth. The other view they see is the secular view, which they don't necessarily agree with, and that is that everything we observe around us, all the phenomena, can be explained through natural processes with no influence of the supernatural whatsoever. There are a few other worldviews too, but those are the two primary ones. And I'm not here to tell you either one is right or wrong, but you may hold to one of them or the other, and that's perfectly fine. But it will influence how you problem solve as you look at environmental problems. These are the ethics and your culture and your worldview are all going to play a part in the methods and the approaches that you would take to addressing and trying to solve environmental problems. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? It's certainly not a bad thing. Any of ethics, culture, and worldview all need to play some role. When we look at the application of ethics in environmental science, we're looking at the relationship between humans and the environment. We kind of break down into three camps, not in terms of, there's only one or the other, but three parts of that application is anthropocentrism, biocentrism, and ecocentrism. Anthro means human, or man, so anthropocentrism, centrism is centered, so it's human-centered, meaning humans and human welfare would be the most important thing to consider when applying environmental ethics to an environmental problem. So how is this solution going to affect humans? Because that's the most important thing to consider. Whereas biocentrism would be looking at all living things having value, but yet some living things may be more important than others. So you would take that kind of a viewpoint or approach to solving your environmental problems. Ecocentrism is where the entire community is more important than the individuals within the community. Okay? So those are just different ways we apply environmental ethics, kind of different viewpoints of what's important and what's not, and we may apply these differently based on the particular problem that we're addressing. But these are things to be aware of. Are you coming at it from humans are most important, or are you coming at it from living things are most important, or from like the community as a whole is more important? And when I say community, I don't just mean human communities, but could be any species, any organism, or group of organisms that live together are a community. So, all right. So the The other thing to consider here is environmental justice. There's a bit of a movement in terms of environmental justice and trying to make sure that the solutions we come up with to solve problems like pollution and even global warming, if it is in fact anthropogenic or caused by human consumption of fossil fuels, are the solutions we're coming up with to solve those problems fair to all societies and all cultures and all peoples. So the environmental justice movement is trying to promote fairness in our policy and environmental practice adoptions so that nobody is unfairly treated as a result of those policies. And we'll get into that later in the year, what that really means, and it's pretty deep stuff, so I don't want to get ahead of myself with that today. So that's pretty much it for this presentation. So go ahead and answer the few questions at the end there, and be looking for the next lesson. Enjoy!